This talk deals with operations management. Now, this is one of a series of classes on this topic, and it's worth going over the other ones, making your own notes, doing some research from PDFs and so on, and getting a fuller understanding of what is involved in operations management. However, let's look at what we've got here. We'll start by looking at the job roles within operations management. Now you'll find that this overlaps with some of the other classes, and it's inevitable almost that there are areas of commonality between this and what we're going to do here, I should say, and with what happened in previous or other classes. So let's look at the job roles within operations management. First of all, the operations management will deal with the technology and the methods of production. Now, it could be a service that's been produced, but they will still look at what technology, what the physical environment required for the production of the service will be, what methods will be used to deliver it, what's the sequence of the tasks that are required. And with goods, with production goods, they will also look at the machinery, with the processes, the way the whole shop floor is laid out, the way the stores is laid out, and so on. So it's looking at the technology and the methods of production, and that's in a sense the macro concern of operations management. But it'll also look in detail at such things as the facilities and the space utilization to make sure that the whole system, if it's a factory floor, make sure it's well laid out, that there is a logic in the way it's set out to facilitate the production. If it's an office, the space should be optimized as well. It should be logically set out. And if it's an office, it should take into account the requirements of the people working in the office as well, in terms of light and heat and so on. There are strategic issues that overlap with operations management. Sometimes the strategists within the business may come up with ideas about the future and what they can do, and these have to be tempered to some extent by the role of the operations management to point out what is feasible, what can be done and what can't be done. It's pointless spending a lot of time planning the future if it involves a lot of resources and a lot of change when the resources are not actually available. So it's the operations management who have their feet on the ground. It's the operations management who know what is required, who know what the job is, who know the problems and the issues involved in the production or in the delivery of a service. These are the people who do the job and who have got the practical experience of delivering the product at the end. So they're able to input into any strategic plans or any strategic thinking their experiences, which will influence the overall strategic future of the business, the strategic direction of the business. They may also look at things, very practical things like response time. How long does it take for the system to respond? If an order is placed for raw materials, how long does it take between placing the order and receiving the raw materials? How long between actually placing that order and the lorry arriving with the raw materials? Let's say it's delivered by lorry and it's whatever. It's something for the stores. So what's the response time? Because that must be factored in. That's a part, in a sense, of the overall planning of the business, the nitty-gritty planning, the fundamental planning of the business. It looks at what the response time is in conjunction with the actual production time and the dispatch time at the end, because that's the total time it takes to produce the goods. And there should be some policy regarding response times. How fast does it take to switch over in production from one line of production to a different? If the machines are tooled up to make a certain product, if they have to be now retooled to make a different product, how long does it take? Because that is part of the consideration. That is part of the overall time and resource package that is allocated to the job, or should be allocated to that particular job. And operations management deals with people. It deals with people on the shop floor. It deals with line managers. It deals with store managers and engineers and professionals in the office. It deals with people. And the people need to be kept up to date. There should be training programs, properly organized and properly delivered. And training should be ongoing. They should be efficient. And they should know their worth within the organization. And they should be motivated to not just be involved in the business on a day-to-day basis, but be motivated to develop themselves and make a better contribution as time goes on. And it's the job of the operations management to engage these people and to ensure that they are properly looked after, treated, and developed. And customer service, that's really what it's all about. If the customer service is positive, then there will be return orders and the business will prosper. If the customers are annoyed or upset or disappointed by the product or the contact they have with the business, they may seek alternatives elsewhere. So operations management must ensure that the contact between the customer, which may go through the marketing department, the marketing personnel, but that's part of the operations management. That's part of the organization's operations. So it may go through people who know the customers and who know the requirements of the customers, but the customer experience should be positive, and it's the job of the overall operations management to ensure that the customers are satisfied and happy and content with the product, and also prepared to place replacement orders in the future, perhaps. And that's linked to quality. The quality of the product should be set at a high standard, and it should be monitored throughout. Now, as I said in other classes on this topic, the idea of total quality management is good. It requires resources. It's not a freebie. It's not something that can just be done. It has to be programmed, has to be timed, and it has to be implemented. But it can also be very worthwhile because it stops bad work going through the system and at the end reject it. It sorts out bad workmanship, faulty products and so on. It sorts them out as they happen. So no more time and effort is expended on them. They are taken out of the system and will not be a concern to machines or operators or personnel further along the line, closer to the customer. So the quality must be monitored, and there must be some sort of benchmarking to say what is good quality and what is unacceptable. Cost reduction is an ongoing theme. In what ways can costs be reduced? It can be in organization, in the layout of the plant. It can be in negotiating discounts on purchases. It can be in the design of the stores and the way the stores is integrated into the production system. It can be the stores try to minimize stocks using a just-in-time policy. It can be run in various ways, but it depends crucially on the business, the product, and the experiences of the business the experiences they have in dealing with their suppliers and with their customers. But there should be a constant review of costs to see if some savings can be made within the organization, so the organization becomes leaner. The idea of reducing inventory and going to just in time is a good idea, but again, as I pointed out in a separate video, it depends. It depends on the security that the business has in its suppliers. Suppliers may promise delivery on a certain date, but they themselves have machine breakdown, or their transport breaks down, or something happens, key personnel are away ill, or something happens, and they can't meet the delivery. If it's genuinely just in time and the deliveries don't arrive, production will stop. The whole factory could stop, and that is a waste of resource. The overheads are continuing and nothing is being produced. So sometimes companies say they subscribe to a just-in-time policy, but they may actually be holding some minimal stock, some amount of stock, just in case. Just in case some issue arises, they may hold stock to cover them over perhaps a week. So if the deliveries don't arrive on time, they've got a week in which to sort it out. Now, that's not just in time, but it may be a prudent plan. It depends on the product, depends on the business, it depends on the reliability of the suppliers and so on. But stock held in the stores is dead money. The stock is not doing anything. It's investment, and it's just sitting there waiting to be used. But whilst it's sitting there, it's idle. So the drive is to try and minimize the stocks in the stores. Productivity improvement is related to cost reduction and inventory reduction and better response times and so on. So it overlaps, but trying to look at the output per machine or the output per worker to see what can be done to improve the throughput. It might be that there's a new technology available. Perhaps the use of computers and better information flows around the system will improve productivity. If everybody is kept in the loop, everybody knows what's happening, everybody knows what jobs are coming through and where they've got to and what they can expect next, productivity may increase as a consequence. So these are some of the typical job roles of operations management. Now, the characteristics of goods, and here I'm going to distinguish between goods and services, but here let's talk about goods, and by that I mean some sort of tangible product. It's something that's made, something that can be touched. So it's a product in a very traditional sense of the word. It's something that can be touched, it's something which has come off the production line at the end. Now we need to be able to define the product carefully. In other words, there should be a consistent definition of the product. We should know what the output is, and we should know how to measure it. So we have to have some sort of idea of what the product is that's coming off the line. Now, that may sound a trivial thing to say, but some companies may produce many products. For example, in the clothing industry, they may produce essentially the same product but in different colors. So there must be some sort of classification as to what's been produced, what styles have been produced, what colors have been produced, and so on. So there should be a consistent product definition. It's also the case that production is usually separate from consumption. The two things happen separately. The items are produced and then subsequently are consumed. Back to the clothing example. The clothing is made, it comes off the production line, it's dispatched, and only then will the customers perhaps purchase the product and start consuming it, start wearing it. If it's a garment, they will start to wear it, and that is the act of consumption. So usually production and consumption are separated in time. Physical goods can also be put into stock. They can be put into inventory. An inventory of them can be kept, and they can be put away in stores. They can be held by retailers or wholesalers, or they're physical items, so they can be counted up and put away. Services can't. We'll see this later. There's low customer interaction. Generally speaking, with physical goods, the company doesn't deal with the customers directly. The customers place orders. They may place the orders for, again, clothing items, for example, and it'll come through warehouses or it'll come through specialist agents. Customers only contact the business directly if it's a big order and perhaps it's for something very specialized. Then the customers may contact the business directly. So if the business is building ships, then the customer may contact the business directly and place the order. But you can see it's a very exceptional situation. Now, the characteristics of a service. Well, we can't touch a service. The service is provided. If in a law firm, if a member of the law firm draws up a contract for us, the contract is not the paper it's written on, it's the actual contract that's agreed. If it's a marketing business, it supplies a service in collecting information and collecting data about customers and analysing the data or whatever. It's intangible. It's information. So services tend to be intangible. We can't touch the service. And generally speaking, it's produced and consumed at the same time. A lot of services, when they come into existence, they are consumed at the same time. If we order food in a restaurant, you could say production takes place in advance of the consumption, but by and large, the production is a consequence of the order taken. So we experience the food, and the food is produced and consumed within a short space of time. Perhaps at the same time in some cases. Often services are unique. Sometimes clothing, for example, may be produced to particular specifications. The customer wants a particular style of clothing and will require that. The customers are normally very much to the fore in the production and delivery of services. Customer interaction is important because the customers can deal directly with the producer, make sure that the designs that they require are clearly understood, make sure that the production is according to their specification, and get a good quality service in return for their expenditure. So customers tend to be more active in the service industry. Customers tend to be more vocal and more obvious in the service industry. Products are difficult to classify sometimes in the service industry. Legal products, for example, court cases are different. So there's an inconsistent product definition. You don't just get a lawyer or a solicitor to go to court. The court cases are different and they involve different processes. So there's an inconsistency in the product. With marketing, there are different issues that confront the marketing company. With design, there may be a lot of consultation or very little consultation with the customer, depending on the nature of the brief that's been given to the design company. But the product definition is not very clear. It's not a standard product, so it's not very clearly defined. And often services are knowledge-based. For example, market research is collecting information about products. There could be consultancy products and services that are available to businesses, and the consultants will do a study of some aspect of the business. It's knowledge-based. They're reporting back their findings. And they're frequently dispersed. It's often the case that service companies will have to leave their premises to go to clients to conduct their survey or their questionnaires or do their consultancy or take a briefing or whatever it is. So often they have to travel, they have to be outside of their own business. And also sometimes they have to employ other specialists to feed into what they're doing. So the work itself is not very linear. The work itself may involve specialists from different areas, all contributing towards a particular project. So the characteristics of services are radically different from those of individual products. So goods can be resold. That's because they're physical. They can be bought and resold. They can be put into stock. Some aspects of quality measurement can be undertaken with physical goods. Do they meet the physical requirements that are set out in the design specifications? And selling is quite distinct from production. Now with services, reselling a service, well, that's difficult to conceive of. Once we've bought a service, we've consumed it. And we can't put a service into stock. We can't save the service. Quality is difficult to measure also with the service. It can be done. We can, to some extent, measure the success that flows from buying the service, the satisfaction that we've got from buying the particular service. But it's difficult to know if the quality was high or not so high, or we can't measure it. It's very difficult because we don't have a benchmark. It's very difficult to benchmark services in terms of quality. And selling is part of the service. So the service itself is we buy it and we consume it. And it's like we buy it and consume it at the same time. With goods and services, well, products, our product is transportable. We can move a product. It's physical. We can move from one place to the next. The site of the facility is important for cost. Where we place it is important. If it's a very large item we're producing, very heavy and very difficult to move, then we want it near where the customers are. Sometimes we can automate the production of goods, because there's a lot going through the system and specialist machinery can be brought in to automate it. And the revenue is generated from selling these physical items. Now with services, the provider, not the product, is transportable. With a service, we're buying the services of a person. So the person may visit us, but the service is not transportable. The person who delivers the service is. The person who enables this, the person who enables the service comes to us, but in a sense not the service. The service and the person who delivers it are one and the same. The site of the facility is not important for customer contact. With information flows, particularly now with the advent of secure networks, we're able to send information across networks. So the site of the location of the service is not that important. It's only if the personnel from the business must visit clients to minimize transport costs and to minimize the problems of getting personnel to visit the clients, that determines to some extent the location of the business. But the actual service itself may flow over computer lines. So a business plan, for example, can be emailed. A consultancy can be conducted online by teleconferencing. And services are difficult to automate because they are so variable. I gave the example of the court case. A court case where there's a service delivered by legal personnel, but court cases are different, so it can't be automated. And the revenue is generated primarily from intangible services. Now, measurement problems. Well, quality may change while the quantity of inputs and outputs remain constant. There is a measurement problem with quality to try and make sure that the quality meets the specifications. If it meets the specifications, it's good quality. So simply measuring inputs and outputs is not good enough. The quality of the product is very important. That's what determines the success of the business. And external elements may cause an increase or decrease in productivity. There may be labour shortages, shortages of particular types of skills within the community, within the economy. It may be that the business has to implement more training programs internally. Overall, there will be a decrease in productivity and an increase in costs, perhaps due to factors outside of the control of the business. And that's why governments want a well-trained workforce, adequately trained, and who are capable of working under various conditions and will be productive. So external elements can determine the productivity of the business. Now that's just an example with people, but external factors may also influence the productivity of the business in terms of transport networks, which may not be reliable. It could be suppliers are not reliable, or suppliers find it difficult to meet delivery requirements. These are all external factors that can influence the productivity of the business. Also, sometimes we can't measure the units precisely. The enjoyment that a customer gets from a product is difficult to measure. We could try to ask them, did they like it a lot or not so much, or what was their experience? what we're doing, of course, is we are dealing in the realms of subjectivity. We're dealing in the realms of their opinions. So looking at the actual experience of the buyers, that is something which is difficult to measure. And yet, that's very important because that determines whether there will be future orders or not. Service productivity. Well, typically service productivity is labor intensive. Service productivity is a service. It's a service that one person provides for another. And it's frequently individually determined. If we go for a haircut, we tell the barber or the hairstylist what we want. So it's individually designed. We tell the person cutting the hair or styling the hair as to what we require precisely. Often an intellectual task is performed by professionals. So some tasks may require a lot of professional expertise. For example, drawing up a set of accounts for a business. Well, that has to be controlled by various standards. So not everyone can draw up a set of accounts for a business. Services can't be mechanized. Services tend to be direct. One person undertaking a service for another person. They're not mechanized. It can't be automated. It can't be taken over by a machine. It's a person-to-person type of relationship. And it's very difficult to assess the quality. With a physical item, we can compare it to the standards, the standards set out in the design. Products are made according to a particular design. With services, it's difficult to gauge the quality precisely because it's difficult to measure the product precisely. So we have a lot of variability in the production of services. And that's it for this session. That's all I'm going to do. Please look at the other classes in this series on operations management. Put all of these notes together, make your own notes, join them together and do some reading on the topic to get a fuller picture, an overall picture of what operations management is about. That's all I'm going to do, so let's leave it at that and say thank you for watching.